Welcome to our EM service. We're glad you are here. Our message title for today is Disciples Are Blessed out of Matthew 3:5-12. And we are in our new series. So we're starting a new 6-week series today called The Kingdom of God is Here. The Kingdom of God is Here. So growing up, how many of you guys, what were the movies or stories that you loved as a kid? Loved. Like Disney people in here, okay? Nowadays they're remaking all of the classics into live versions of it. What was your favorite Disney movie or story, or your favorite book growing up, or your favorite story growing up? Think about it. What was it? You don't have to tell us, but what was that favorite story? And what about it drew you in as a child? A lot of the stories you see, there's a very similar premise. Always. There's a similar kind of idea. And this is a story that we often hear, whether it's Cinderella or Tangled or Frozen or whatever it is that, Toy Story, a little different. But any of those kinds of movies or stories, I grew up, I was Pixar didn't exist when I was a kid in the 90s. So we grew up on the original classic Disney's. So Cinderella, Lion King was my favorite. Pocahontas my favorite. Those are stories I grew up with. But this is the common thing in all those stories. Here's how it goes. Once upon a time, right? That's mostly how it starts. Once upon a time, and every story is a little bit different, but here's the basic idea. Once upon a time, there was a peaceful kingdom with a beautiful, whatever, prince, princess, family, whatever it is, right? And everything was wonderful. Until some bad guy or some bad girl from somewhere comes and messes it all up, right? They poison something or whatever it is. Something gets ruined in this peaceful kingdom, and now everything is broken. And the true prince or prince is hidden away somewhere, right? No one knows where they are. They don't even know that they're actual prince or princess. And the whole story is restoring that peaceful kingdom to its rightful place. That's most stories. Even the Marvel series or whatever, that's the basic idea too. It's always that same premise. Once upon a time, there was a kingdom, whatever, messed up, restoring it back. Now, why does that kind of storyline captivate us so much? It captivates us because that is the basic premise of all history, of all creation. Do you ever wonder, when you're on a plane or when you're looking up at the sky and you see a plane, I don't know, do you ever feel that moment when you realize how small you are? In the grand scheme of the entire world, 7 billion people in this planet, right? In the grand scheme of things, how tiny are you? How tiny are you? You are a speck of dust. That's how tiny you and I are in the grand scheme of things. There's got to be something, a bigger story that we're somehow all a part of because you are. See, the great history, the great story of all time started like this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And he made a beautiful kingdom and created beautiful people to be his rulers in this kingdom. And then everything got messed up as Satan and sin entered the world. Brokenness, fallenness. Do you see a pattern? Sounds very similar, right? That story is very similar. And now we're all searching for a way back home, a way to restore that kingdom. See, because God is all about building his kingdom and restoring his people to what he made them to be. That's you and I. We're part of a bigger story. If you live for a long time on this earth, maybe you'll live to be 90, That's a long time. Have you guys seen 90-year-olds? They're real wrinkly, okay? And they kind of smell. You know what I'm talking about? The old person smell? You know what I'm talking about, okay? Oh, I shouldn't say that because she's probably watching. My grandma's 90 and she don't smell though. She smells great. But you know what I mean? That's a long time. But if you live a long time, what is at the end of that? What's the bigger picture? What's the bigger purpose? In other words, whose kingdom are you building in your life right now? Every day when you live, you clock into your job. You need to go to work, okay? Don't be homeless. But the point being, like, what is the bigger point? What's the bigger picture? Why do you go to school? You know, why do this and that? Like, what is the grand scheme of things? There is. God is building his kingdom here on this earth. When Jesus came, that's why the series is called The Kingdom of God is Here. Because when he came, he literally brought down heaven to earth. Everything Jesus did was countercultural. Everything he did messed up the status quo. Everything he did shook the whole system up. Because what he was doing was bringing the kingdom of God to earth. And as his followers, we replicate that everywhere we go. In any kingdom, this week is what? 4th of July, okay? I'm sure, did you guys have neighbors who started doing fireworks last night? Oh my gosh, so annoying. Anyway, point being, okay, I learned this in my history class in college. I did not realize this. Everyone thinks that the 4th of July is the first day of America's, what? Okay, birthday, independence. But y'all know, actually, us Americans are very cocky, right? Because we declared that our Declaration of Independence, right? We weren't actually independent. We were in a war for 4 years after that, okay? So our actual Declaration of Independence happened like 1983. Anyway, the point being, sorry, 1983. Thank you, Nick, 1783. But anyway, the point being, this week is the 4th of July, right? In our country, in America, what rules our country? What? Huh? Not who, because he's gone in a couple years. He's not permanent. What rules our country? Y'all. No, like, that's true. But like, what has ruled our country since the beginning of when we became a country? No, that's a declaration. Wait, what? I heard it. Thank you. We are all, who's an American citizen? Raise your hands. Okay, all right. So the Constitution is what dictates our nation, correct? All of our rules, all of our laws, all of our branches of government are dictated by what? The Constitution. Okay. Any country without a constitution, what's going to happen? Or like some kind of, like, you get what I'm saying? There's anarchy, right? Every country has something that guides the entire country. Right? Okay. So today's passage we're going to go into in Matthew 5. This is Jesus' most famous sermon, like of all time. Okay? Like this is the most famous one he's ever given. It's Matthew 5, 6, 7. 3 chapters called the Sermon on the Mount. This is his most famous teaching. Now, what he teaches here in Matthew 5 is kind of like the constitution for God's kingdom. Does that make sense? So like if we are choosing to be a citizen of God's kingdom, saying, I'm giving my life to you, it's not just about being saved. That's the beginning. You are born. But now in every household, there's unspoken rules, right? Like unspoken things that we live by. Whether it's good or not, that's a different question. But there are unspoken things that we all live by. In God's kingdom, we see that most in Matthew 5, 6, 7. Now, okay, growing up, I'm curious. Who memorized the preamble? Did you get, how does it start? We, the people. I forget the rest, but that's basically how it starts, okay? Like most of us memorize that. Like the beginning is the most important part, right? The beginning is Matthew 5, and that right there is called the Beatitudes. There's 8 blessings that Jesus shares with us, and that really guides what it looks like to live as a part of God's kingdom. So why is what I'm sharing today important? Because I want you to see you're part of a bigger story. You're part of a bigger story. History is moving in a certain direction. At the end of the day, in Daniel 2, we see that at the end of the day, every other kingdom will fall. If you notice history, like who are the great kingdoms of the earth? Egypt, Greece, Rome, Babylon, whatever it was, right? Like all throughout history, great kingdoms rise and great kingdoms fall. America, probably on its decline right now, to be honest. You know what I mean? Like every kingdom will rise and every kingdom will one day fall. Because at the end of the day, the only kingdom that will stand is his. That's it. And so I want to live my life today as a part of his kingdom, according to his constitution, according to his way of living, because God's kingdom is very upside down from what the world tells us, always. See? You gotta wake up, you gotta listen, okay? So Matthew 5, it's his constitution. Here we see in Matthew 5, verse 3, The first blessing, he tells us, he says this, God, because who wants to be blessed? Raise your hands. If you don't, you're going to miss out. All right. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. This is not talking about money, okay? It's not money poor. It's poor in spirit. The idea behind this is, you see in that verse, it's realize your need for God. That's what makes you a follower of his kingdom. You have to realize your need for God. In our world, in our American society, what do we live by? You got to be the best. You got to have confidence and to be able to break through, and you know what I mean? We're the opposite of that. We're you got to be self-sufficient. We're really good at that. You got to be all powerful. You have to figure it out. That's kind of how we live in this world. But God is saying, in my kingdom, if you're my follower, you have to realize first and foremost your need for me. I honestly think that's why God allows hard things to happen in our lives. God is not the one. God cannot do evil. That cannot happen. But does God allow certain things to happen? Yes. I think it's for our good. This is a really bad analogy, but a long time ago, because nowadays you shouldn't do that. But the hard parenting where if you don't want to eat, they're fine, don't eat, starve. And then you'll never starve again. You'll learn your lesson. You know what I mean? That kind of thing, that kind of way of parenting. Nick's that's right. That's how I grew up, But that idea of sometimes hard things have to happen to realize our need and our dependence on God. Same thing. God's kingdom is based on how much you need him. So let me ask you, this week, did you live realizing your need for him? Did you come face to face with your shortcomings? That's wonderful then. You know why? Because through that you realize I cannot live by my own strength. I have to live by God alone. He's saying when you realize you need me, you are blessed. Why? Because I give you the kingdom. That's how God works. It's an upside down kingdom. If you realize your need for me, you will receive all I have to give you. That's what defines what it means to be in his kingdom. Number 2, Matthew 5:4. God blesses those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. There's 2 ways to interpret this. Mourning, who mourns when you're grieving, right? Something happens. It's not just death. Death is a very obvious thing to grieve, but there's a lot of things to grieve in this life. The older you get, the more you realize that life is about a lot of grieving. Grieving things that could have been that never happened. Grieving relationships that are broken. Grieving change. There's lots of things that bring grief and mourning into our lives. And God is saying, when you mourn, that's where I find you. I will comfort you. That's one interpretation. But the second one is this. When you realize your need for him, that's a head knowledge thing, right? It causes an emotional reaction of mourning. An emotional reaction of I cannot live for you without you, God. If you've done the Christian life long enough, you will have come face to face with this. Those moments, I think we have 2 temptations as Christians. Either to think, I'm a freaking amazing Christian. I am so good at following God. I'm all that. I'm on this and I do that. That's one temptation, okay? The other temptation is to do the exact opposite of I am such an awful person. I am a bad Christian. I'm so bad at doing this. You get the 2 extremes. And what God is saying is neither of those are really healthy. I want you to have a healthy understanding that you need me and that without me, you can't live. But when you realize that, I will meet you in that place. I will comfort you in that place. This sounds so contrary to how we live, but his kingdom is upside down. We live by a different standard as his people. And as he calls us to live that way, he's promising us, I will meet you in that place. When you are in need, when you are in mourning, when you realize how you can't live for God without God, that's perfect. You finally got the lesson. Yeah, you can't live for God without God. If you try to live for God just by your own discipline, you will not get very far. You will burn out. You will wander away. Why? He does that for our good. He allows that for our good to realize that we need him. So our constitution of God's kingdom is based on dependence on him. And that leads us to the next one, Matthew 5:5. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. You know who inherits people, or you know who inherits things in our world today? Those who are proud, those with resources, those who have money, right? They're the ones who inherit things. Most of us grew up as immigrant kids. Most of us, none of us trust babies. Okay, like we don't got mom. If my mom has no debt, that's great. You know, like that's kind of how we were raised. You know what I mean? Did you guys know there's a 3-generation rule? Have you heard of this? In like any big, what's that called? Like, like chaebols in like Korea. You know, like people who inherit old money. There's a 3-generation rule. The first generation is the rags to riches story, right? Like they had nothing and they crazy whatever, like success, and they made it all. And so they work hard for it because they're the ones who did it. Second generation saw their parents doing that. And so they understand that this wealth is like important to steward. And so it goes well. The third generation is where it falls apart, usually. Because that grandchild didn't witness the grandparent working that hard. They were just born into like a good, you know what I mean? Like a lot of riches. And so the third generation is where it usually falls away. Same thing for Christianity. Like if your parents are the first generation to like meet Jesus and experience God, most second generation will have like a basic idea of that. Like they'll have grown up in church, you know, like that's kind of makes sense to them. But the third generation is where it often falters away. Like that same rule applies lots of different things. In the same way, God is saying, when you are humble and you realize your need for me, that's what inherits the entire earth. That's what inherits like all things. You inherit riches in my eternal kingdom because you seek me and you know me and you are humble before me. I don't know what generation you are in your family of knowing God. Maybe you're the first. Maybe you're the third or the second. I have no idea. But every generation needs to meet God in their own way. Every generation. You cannot ride on your parents' coattails very long. What's that called? Apron strings? You know what I mean? Like you can't ride on your parents' experience of God. You can't ride on someone else's experience of God. You have to have your own. And when you experience God, what's the first thing you realize? It humbles you. Because you realize how great God is and how much we need him. Next one, Matthew 5:6. God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they'll be satisfied. This is what defines people in God's kingdom. People who hunger and thirst for justice, for righteousness, for things to be made right. When you're hungry or thirsty, what do? You find a way to satiate that hunger, right? Like even babies who can't really do much, they will let you know they are hungry. And they will find a way to get that need met. What makes you hungry? I mean, like food, yes. But like in this world, what makes you hungry? What are you hungry for? It's maybe you're like, oh, I'm hungry for this, that. Like, go deeper than the surface. Most of us, as human beings, we're hungry to be loved, to be seen, to be known, to be understood, whatever. We all have needs deep down inside. All of you. But what drives what you do? Because all of you have a drive. Maybe you're at a place in life where you've reached a lot of goals that you've had for yourself for like 5-10 years ago. You've reached them. What brought you there? What drives you? What pushes you? You have to know what that is. In God's kingdom, what drives us, what pushes us is for justice, is for rightness. Like if you look at the news nowadays, which I don't because I cannot handle it, but like there's a lot of messed up things going around. You don't have to look at the news, all you have to do is look on social media, right? Like there's lots of really messed up things and people and like awful things happening in our world. When I hear about things happening to children or whatever, like things that should not be done, like it boils my blood, you know? Like God, you must do something. You know, like sometimes in my head, I just keep thinking like one day Jesus is going to come back and he's going to make all the wrong things right. He will, because that's what drives us as his people is justice and righteousness. There is a right. There are many shades of gray to that. And yet, God, there is a standard. There is a line to which we have to understand what is right and what is wrong. And he will come and make all wrong things right. And so we live for that. We embody that. Everywhere we go, we embody that kind of heart. Matthew 5:7. This is good. God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. This is what defines people of God's kingdom. Now, do you know how you show mercy to someone? Okay, we're not saying like mercy, like what we mean by mercy in this is this. Someone who you want to judge that person, or like you maybe spilling the tea, whatever it is about that person, however y'all define it now, like, or like you judge someone, like we all do that kind of thing, right? Instead of doing that, God is saying, be merciful, because you realize how much I have saved you, how much I have been merciful to you. In other words, when we judge other people, when we point fingers to other people, when we spill the tea on other people, whatever it may be, we do it because we don't realize how much God has shown us mercy, how much God has taken my wrong and covered it for me. So when we judge, which we all do, everybody in this room judges, right? We all do. Maybe you're smart enough not to say it out loud, okay? But if you say it inside, you still thinking it, you know what I mean? All of us do that. But when we do that, let that be a reminder to me, maybe I have not experienced, I have forgotten how much he has not judged me, how much he has forgiven me, how much God has been merciful to me. So this week, who's that person that drives you insane? Like you would like to dump them, but you can't. Because for whatever reason, you can't, All of you right now, a face is coming to mind. I know the Lord is bringing up a face to mind. And some of you are giving really good glares and stares to each other right now, okay? But the point being is this, that person that comes to mind, God is asking you right now, how can you be merciful to that person this week? Because you have to realize how much God's had mercy on you. That person that drives you crazy. Who is that person? How can you show mercy to that person? It's those kinds of things. When when you're like, you really want to start judging, and then that poke you feel of like, oh, Stacey said I shouldn't do that this week. That is the Lord speaking to you, okay? Because I'm not there. Like, God is showing us small ways that he wants us to autocorrect and say, hey, look, that's not how you live in my kingdom. It's very easy to go that direction, but what kind of fruit will come from that? Don't come coming to me. God is saying, don't come coming to me in a few months and be like complaining about the bad fruit because, you sowed that seed, So God is saying, don't sow that seed. Sow it in mercy. Sow it in mercy. Next one, Matthew 5:8. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. This is very self-explanatory. What you see, what you hear, it influences all of us. What we think and how we act, how we spend our money. That's why marketing works, you guys. Who's ever watched when you watch something and there's product placement, and you're like, I suddenly want Taco Bell. It tastes like barf and it's so bad for me, but I suddenly want whatever nacho fries or whatever it is. You know what I mean? It works because what you see influences what you think and what you end up doing with your time and money. I know that's real simple, but God is saying, look, everyone wants to see God. In this room, if you're like, I don't want to see God, I don't think that exists. Everyone's like, yeah, I want to experience more of God. Yeah, sure. Or maybe you're like, I don't see God, I don't hear God. Let me ask you, what are you looking at? What are you listening to? Because what you look at and listen to is what you think. And there is limited brain space, okay, in your day. And if all we see and do is stuff from this world that drives us further away from God, it gets harder and harder to hear him and to see him in your everyday, even though he's there. It's like he's trying to speak to you, but like it's like blaring music, around you, and you just can't. He is there and he is speaking to you, but you just can't hear it. You know what I mean? This is a really simple principle, but this is one that is so true. What do you listen to? What do you say? This week, Nicole's at my house, and we were preparing some kind of praise thing. I forgot what it was. And she said, one song. I think it was Run to the Father. And I was like, oh, yeah. I was doing dishes. I was really busy. And then I was singing that song. I was like, why am I singing that song? And I was like, oh, all she did was say one thing, and that song was just in my head. You know what I mean? Or you wake up dreaming about something, or thinking about, literally, everything in your life is influenced by what you hear, what you see, even if it's a small thing. So let me ask you this week, what did you look at? Look at your screen time. How much time goes to each app, y'all? Apple ain't lying to you. Maybe they are, but for that, hopefully they're not, you know what I mean? Who do you follow? Do a deep cleaning, y'all. Look at your socials. Who are you following? What algorithms are working against you right now? To sell you things that maybe make your life not so great. It's that simple. That's where it starts. I'm not saying do crazy big. Start with those things of okay, I do want to hear more of God's voice. So maybe I should look at what I look at all the time. How does that influence me? Next one, Matthew 5:9. God blesses those who work for peace, for they are called children of God. Everywhere you go, you have influence. In your house, in your workplaces, in your schools, in your relationships, all of you have influence in those places. You are called to bring peace, not to bring division. So don't spill that tea, okay? Oh, I don't know what the word is, but you know what I mean? Peace, we are called to be peacemakers everywhere we go. And by that, people will know that we are people of God. Next one, this is the last one. It's longer. This is the hardest one. This is the one that I don't like the most. But God says this, God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. Be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. How hard is that to do? It's hard enough to do the right thing. But then you do the right thing and people make fun of you for it or persecute you for it, or you sacrifice because of it. But God is saying, when you are in my kingdom, you do what you do because you realize there's eternity. There's something bigger than just right now. You're living for more than just right now. Who here is smart enough or has the resources to invest money? Okay, who's investing money? They're not going to raise their hand because they're I don't want to pay for anything for you. Okay, all right. So whoever's investing money right now in stocks or whatever it may be, or who has a 401k? Good job, Jalen. Grace, good, okay. 401k, retirement. Do you have a retirement plan? Good. A couple of them I think you have. Okay, but the point being, why do you put money away for retirement? Okay, why do you put money away for retirement? Because retirement, those investment plans, time is your greatest asset. Time is your greatest asset. As time goes by, that money multiplies, right? And you do it, why? Because you want to retire early, right? You want to work all your days. You do it so that later down the road, your life can be easier, right? Same thing. Why do we do what we do now to live for God? Because there is a bigger picture. We are investing in a greater thing beyond this moment right now. Why do we do what we do now? Because there's eternity. What you do is not how you enter the kingdom of God, but how you live today does impact your eternity. And so, today, right now, what are you doing? Are you living for eternity or not? As I wrap up today, this is just the preamble. This is just the beginning of God's constitution, of what it looks like to live for his upside down kingdom. There are 8 different beatitudes. For each of you, I'm sure there's at least one, Maybe it was the merciful one, that person came to your mind. You're like, I don't want to be merciful right now, or like whatever it was. Are you investing in eternity? Whatever it is, like all of us have one that came to mind. Okay. If you don't, you better think of one, because that's part of your questions. But the point being, all of us, I'm asking you, are you living the surrendered life? Because that's what defines a Christian. Surrendering to him, dependent on him. When you're doing well, that's when we surrender more. Because we know that it's so easy for us to fall away. And when things are good, we get busy, distracted. We forget to thank God for our blessings and worship him. When things are good, that's when you come to God more. When things are bad, that's when you come to God more. When things are average, that's when you come to God more, because we don't want to be stuck in complacency. So let me ask you, are you living the surrendered life? Are you living according to his kingdom, his constitution? Whose kingdom are you building? His or yours? If you're building yours, I'm telling you, one day it will all fall. It will all fall. Because when you die, what do you leave with? Your birthday soup. That's it. Nothing. You got nothing. Maybe you leave a great inheritance for somebody else. What's that 3-generation rule? Who knows, man? One day, it will all fall. Only God's kingdom will stand. And so what are we doing with our lives to invest into his kingdom, to bringing people to know him, to bringing righteousness and goodness in the places you go? Maybe you're like, I just work at some podunk place. I don't know how I'm going to bring God's kingdom there. Everywhere you go, you're an agent of peace. Everywhere you go, you're an agent of justice. Everywhere you go, you bring God's presence with you. That's how God's kingdom is here now through us who believe in him. Can I have the praise team come up? Whatever beatitude sticks out to you, mercy, those who are humble, those who do right even though they're persecuted, those who realize their desperate need for him. Whatever it is, I encourage you today. Ask yourself that question. This week, did I build my kingdom? Was I concerned only about the things that I saw, the things that I heard, the things that I did? Or was I concerned about something greater? Was I thinking about how is God using this to grow me spiritually? These Beatitudes, they're like milestones that you can use to compare and realize, am I growing in Christ? Am I maturing spiritually? Because God's kingdom is not just about being saved. It's about growing up in his kingdom. It's about becoming more like Christ. It's about giving our lives to him, surrendering to him every single day. Tomorrow is a new day. Today is a new day. Some of you got up 2 hours ago. So today is basically a new day at this point, today is a new day. It's okay if it wasn't that great. It's fine. Come to God today. Come to God now. God, I want to build your kingdom. I want my life to be worth more than just some person who did their thing and then vanished from the earth, I want my life to sow into something greater. So help me, God, to know you. Can we all stand? We're going to sing this song together. It's communion. Remember how I talked about how God is building his kingdom? He created a garden, and he's bringing it all back to that again. Everything he's doing, he's bringing it back to what it was, to what he made it to be. But the key to that coming back is to know God, is to be with God. So as we sing this song, let's remember, why do I live for him? Why do I follow this constitution? It's because I know and I love my God. Let's sing together.